Greetings world. We are on decay. As we continue on our path of exposing the matrix of today, we have come to a much anticipated topic: chemtrails. So many are confused about them, what they really are, what they really do, and even more people have no idea how dangerous our air is now because of it. We have accumulated many documents from pilots, scientists and fellow whistleblowers which detail the truth of this plot to exterminate humankind. This has been going on with increasing aggression since the 1940s, and possibly before then as our studies continue. We hope this detailed explanation of chemtrails will help us all understand what is being sprayed on us by the elite to exterminate us like dogs. This is another depopulation tactic, but it serves a multitude of purposes. So let us take a moment and look into the ingredients in detail, how they affect us and how the government uses them.
We have so much knowledge in this world. We have a lot of knowledge about almost everything. But what do we actually do with all the knowledge? Do we integrate it into our feet? By this I mean, of course, do we really understand? Because understanding is taking action and so on. Well, when we look at the sky here, what do you see? Or actually, what do you feel? Because do you feel something by watching this sky? Does this look totally normal? Do you feel something in your stomach, in your solar plexus, in your mind, in your head, in your heart, in your legs, in your toes? What do you feel? And what do you see? Sometimes it's very good to feel and see, or add these two together. Actually go outside and see what you are feeling. When we know what things are, we will not be so much influenced by them, because we can change our thoughts, we can change our feelings, and thereby we can change our reality. So we will not be part of the global game, you can say, the global mind control game.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere. Fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere.
A variety of schemes that have been discussed for geoengineering. A classic example is injecting reflecting particles into Earth orbit.
Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about alumina. It turns out, first of all, there's been a lot of work on the environmental consequences of alumina in the stratosphere. The big deal really is that alumina has 4 times the volumetric rate of forcing it for small particles as does sulfur. And that means you have 4 times less surface area for the same rate of forcing, and this is a much bigger deal, you'd have roughly 16 times less the coagulation rate, and that's the thing that really drives removal. So you could get away, we think, with much smaller mass fluxes.
We've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice. It's exactly what geoengineering patents call for: solar obscuration, to block the sun with toxic metal particulates. And unfortunately, with geoengineers, they don't seem to take the consequences into account. The planet is like a giant physics lab for them, and they seem to not be able to look outside that. Increase rain. This is about creating artificial clouds, which reduces rain. When you block the sun, you block evaporation. You block light photons, which diminishes the ability for the sun to knock molecules loose and create evaporation. So what we get is protracted drought in some areas and deluge in others, exactly what we have in the continental US right now. Putting the wrench on planet Earth, this is the epitome of human insanity, to think that they could alter and control these very complex natural systems is insanity of the first order. Has any such testing gone on that we know about? Absolutely. Every day there's more data coming out about not other governments alone, but our government testing on its own people, its own soldiers. And again, our military is full of very, very dedicated, honorable people, full of them. But there are scientists, and there are some in power that use such dedicated and honorable people as pawns in this equation. People who use an excuse that, well, this can't be happening because they wouldn't do it to themselves, that excuse doesn't hold water. Weather warfare. This is going on right now. We appear to have China and Russia on one side of the fence, the NATO countries on the other. The atmosphere has become a battlefield, a very covert battlefield with all life on Earth at stake. Mechanics, airline executives, and doctors talk about Project Cloverleaf. Many ask, are there just military tankers in these programs, or is there commercial aircraft? In fact, with GPS tracking, commercial aircraft have been identified from the ground, leaving particulate trails, and Project Cloverleaf appears to be the outline for this. It makes sense. It's a way of artificially stimulating the economy, keeping non-profitable airlines in the air and flying. 1 in 3 seniors in the U.S. dies with Alzheimer's and or dementia. Doesn't mean dies from it, but dies with it. There's no question that all of us have had our neurological system affected. We're all breathing this stuff. It's inside all our systems. So these are staggering statistics, 1 in 3 with Alzheimer's and or dementia. Autism. Autism has increased 10,000% since 1975. 1 in 50 children now has autism, also related to aluminum. Synergistic effects of environmental and heavy metals. These metals are toxic in and of themselves. When you combine them, they become much more lethal. We've been given studies recently that indicate when mercury and aluminum are combined, toxicity increases as much as 10,000%.
The military and some commercial planes are spraying us with what are called chemtrails. I want you to look at the... And oftentimes, before there's a weather front, there are heavy assaults from these planes just before a weather front is changed and comes in. Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons. Among other documented ingredients in this toxic man-made clouds are pathogenic molds, fungi, weaponized viruses, and made in some places like the secret site at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is supposed to be a cancer site. But there are a number of scholars and professors tracking this that have big questions about this. Barium and nanoaluminum particles. What do these do to the human body? Barium is an alkaline earth mineral. It was discovered in 1774. At low doses, it can act as a muscle stimulant. At high doses, it detrimentally affects the heart and the nervous system. Barium is toxic to all mammals, and that means not just humans. Aluminum, which is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, is known to diminish kidney function and destroy brain cells and cognitive function. Just think about it. Just between the aluminum and the mercury that we're breathing all the time, we've got already a serious issue about brain function and cognitive function. There is also documented evidence that the aluminum in chemtrails is released as nanoparticles, and that when they reach the Earth environment for wildlife, in lakes and streams, it's causing serious problems with wildlife there. Researchers are also finding that nanoparticles interfere with the growth of plants. Nanotechnology is totally unregulated. Just this past month, a new research report came out showing and documenting for the first time that these nanoparticles actually go through the skin. Well, if you breathe them, whether they go through the skin or whether you're inhaling them, it's still a problem.
A condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day, and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation.
These previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0. So 13,100 is pretty damn much, folks. It used to be 0, then it was 100s in the 2000s, and then since 2010, it's into the 1000s and the latest 13,100. In the snow on Mount Shasta, pristine Mount Shasta, 61,000 micrograms per liter, 4 times the amount that is found in the soil up there.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years. And in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you were 80.
Insects. I've done studies in Siskiyou County. They're at 20% of normal. The aquatic insects basically made a nosedive in 2006 to about 20% of normal. So far this year, I've sampled 200 trout stomachs. 98% of them are empty. So sorry about the trout fishing, fellows. The mayflies, stoneflies, dipterus, and caddisflies are damn near gone. The terrestrial sampling is down to about 20% of normal, except for pest species like ants. We're seeing a loss of the major bird species, and as the gentleman said, the ecosystem is unraveling, and Audubon's been telling you that for years.
The materials that are going into the environment right now, aluminum oxide nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles, these just happen to be the same materials that they use in nanothermate explosives. And so when this stuff settles down out of the air into the environment, it is small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the trees in the forest. And so when there's a forest fire, and there will be a forest fire, those fires burn dramatically hotter. The point is that the cost of firefighting, the cost in the healthcare system have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of acreage is lost because of fires. The impact on human health is dramatic.
I personally tested water and aluminum, and I found aluminum had 47 times the normal expected amounts. Strontium had 10 to 20 times the amounts. Barium was 20 times. This is what the stuff looks like here. Collected, it looks, most people just think it's a cobweb, but I tested it, it has outrageous amounts of barium, strontium, and aluminum, but they destroy the sample, so I'm not letting this get away from me.
You know, these tests are international in scope. We're seeing this all over the world, guys. Okay, pH of acid soils is 20 times more alkaline. The aluminum in the soil has doubled in the last 10 years. The rain normal was 5.6, it's 20 times more alkaline. Aluminum blocks essential nutrients. I am unable in my garden to restore normal pH, and that's because nanoparticles are now in the circulatory systems of both plants and humans. Nanoparticles are now in the circulatory systems of both plants and humans.
The first public
nice detailed public description was in the book of Cara St. Louis Farrelly, The Sun Thief, where she says that there are hollow fibers sprayed, self-replicating hollow fibers that are there to kind of read out the light fingerprint of your DNA, transform it into an electromagnetic radio signal that is detectable via satellite and ground stations. This is what she found out by analyzing information dealt with the chemtrail communities in the United States. This is a German tomato that got some German rain on top of itself. This is real time, yes. Now watch the Morgellon, what he does. He loves this. He's getting excited and he's trying to get close. These are basically, it's mycelium of a certain type of fungus. And this fungus is, first, if you want to look at it, it's airborne. It's not a single fiber here and there. It is glowing under UV light. So if you take a UV lamp at night, you can see those fibers airborne. Some of the people cannot handle it. And then the mycelium is starting to grow within the body and starting to multiply. And at a certain point, they are extracted via the skin. And you can see that they have this ability to collect colors. You have blue Morgellons and you have red Morgellons. So they are of technical origin. It's not a natural substance. So you can see them when the skin is opening. You can see them under the microscope if you make a blood analysis. You can see that the blood is infected. And if you look at them, you see they're a little bit more complex than a simple fungus. They have kind of organs inside. They have little red stem cells of an unknown species that are self-replicating as well. Yes. He said it had been tested in the last Iraq war. This was the war was only done for the purpose of testing the system.
Now you're talking about the most recent one with
yes,
George Bush.
with the junior.
With W. Bush.
Yeah.
And they sprayed that in Iraq.
And they sprayed it in Iraq, and we had single news, for example, that they fought back the Iraqi army by utilizing microwave weapons that gave them the feeling that the skin burns. Yeah. This was in public media and yes. mainstream media. And this is not because the microwave weapon had the intensity to make it burn. This is because the RNA was triggered to create the sensation of burning. From the text he says you have these psychotronic weapons, making them give up, making them fall in love with the American soldiers, whatever. A long list of psychotronic functions, and you can make people sick, you can make them die of cancer after 1 year, you can make them die in 6 minutes, and you can make them die in 6 seconds if you want to. And 10 billion US and half a year, I think it was half a year, to optimize the cluster topology. And this is something, it sounds just like science fiction if you say it like this, but if you really think about it, if it is only about infecting humans with a virus-like synthetic RNA, you could give a damn about cluster topology. Cluster topology starts to become an interesting topic. How do they turn people into biorobots? You have the RNA cluster within the air, sprayed in the air with a defined distance from RNA to RNA, and within the human body the same RNA cluster is prolonged within the cells. And now whatever is carried by these clusters, the artificial intelligence or a program or a soul, whatever this is, can travel from the dust into the human being
This is smart dust.
And this is what they call smart dust.
The second group of materials found in these environmental samples is unidentifiable fibers. And I really want you to appreciate the meaning of unidentifiable. These fibers have been sent to sophisticated laboratories, and there is nothing in the databases that match them. These are fibers, we could say, that do not exist in nature. When these fibers are cultured, they produce colonies of filaments. You can see the extension filaments. And these colonies continue to grow and reproduce. A cross-section of a tube. I'm operating on myself, she told me. These tubes are running through my body. The stuff wants to come out. It feels like someone's digging into you with a screwdriver as the tubes grow inside you. The range of materials is incredible. Here's a tissue sac attached to purple fibers and dark metallic fibers twisted like cables. Fiber-laced gel with an insect inside it and a colored fiber cluster. Here are more insects, and a quote. The bugs are in tubes. I pull the tissue out. The tissue is like a tube. I open up the tissue with tweezers. I found ants, moths, spiders, flies, caterpillars. Some insects are hybrids. They're crossed. They don't look right.
As you see, the ingredients of the chemtrails alone should be the primary concern of anyone who breathes air. But there is more. This plot to kill us all goes much deeper and wider than poisons alone. Let us take a look.
Weather modification on a global scale. In fact, these programs are so large and so all-encompassing that all other weather modification programs that go on a smaller regional basis are virtually, they're negated by the scope and scale of the global geoengineering programs. And these programs involve a number of aspects. You have the saturation of the atmosphere with various chemical and metal particulates. And there appear to be various purposes and objectives with this saturation. In conjunction with the saturation, which ionizes the atmosphere, it makes the atmosphere more conductive, we have the HAARP facilities, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. These are ionosphere heaters. Many have heard of the HAARP facilities. There's not just one or two or three. We believe there's at least 18 around the globe, possibly with 3 more being built in Antarctica right now. And once the atmosphere is saturated with these particulates, and then you add the ionosphere heaters, the entire weather system globally is virtually being thwarted. There is no natural weather at this point, and we really don't know what sort of climate conditions we would have necessarily if these programs were brought to a halt. And they desperately need to be brought to a halt, because the saturation of the atmosphere is thwarting the hydrological cycle. It's totally disrupting the rain cycle. Again, we have the artificially nucleated snowstorms, which I just mentioned. You can't go from 100 degrees to snow in one day without a whole lot of help. This includes jet stream manipulation with the HAARP facilities, and we are not guessing at this. We have monitoring sources for this signal, and we can see where the signal is most intense, and that's what steers the jet stream. So then you add artificial ice nucleation, which is a chemical nucleation process. They can turn what should have been rain into snow and drop the temperatures of these storm systems by this artificial chemical nucleation. This isn't sci-fi, this is hard science fact.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles. And secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirm the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night.
Here is a U.S. Air Force document, 1996. It describes the artificial creation of floods, hurricanes, droughts, and earthquakes, and continues. Weather modification will become a part of domestic and international security and could be done unilaterally. It could have offensive and defensive applications and even be used for deterrence purposes. The ability to generate precipitation, fog, storms on Earth, to modify space weather, and the production of artificial weather all are part of an integrated set of military technologies. In the HARP patents and specifications, etc., in the description of a researcher describing and summarizing what it said this: dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium and strontium, the main chemical ingredients of chemtrails, or ingredients of chemtrails, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HARP's weather modification performance. So it's doing that as well. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going here. Dr. Richard Day, 1969, the weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. Control if they eat, and their hearts and minds will follow. This is all part of the control system that they're bringing on. Get them off the land free. Financially, get them off the land. They can't afford to stay there anymore. This is the dynamic between people, politicians, and banks. These answer to the same masters, thus they change legislation to suit them and screw them. This is how it works through this system. This is why the governments are not doing what's right for people, economically or any other way. They're doing it for that which they represent.
It's so obvious that clouds normally don't form this way if they are natural clouds, which they aren't. So there's extreme HARP activity going on here. Now I'm walking, you can... The clouds are over here. It's very strange looking and it's very heavy, you can say. It's like a pressure going on in your head. It's like, yeah, it's like there's a heavy mobile phone radiation going on actually right now. That's how I feel it. And you see how obvious it is. It's amazing, isn't it? And almost every people should be able to see that this is not a normal cloud formation. Look at the straight lines, look at how it's building up.
The reason behind the Paris Agreement and the reason behind the quote-unquote fight against climate change. There is a massive connection that everybody seems to be missing with climate change. You see, these emissions that they all love to talk about and say that humans are causing the emissions. The one bit that they like to twist or just don't say at all is that humans are equivalent to the emissions. So in other words, as Bill Gates states, which you can see in this video here, and of course there's another prominent, depopulation is apparently, according to scientists and environmentalists and bioethicists, is about the only way that they can reduce the CO2 problem, if you want to call it that. The United Nations now owns the climate. In a rather sweeping move for control of the weather, the UN successfully adopted the Paris Agreement into its agenda, citing that climate change is the most important issue of our time. Environmentalists across the globe have offered solutions that range from cutting emissions to depopulation. According to Travis, a bioethicist and a philosopher at the Berman Institute of Bioethics at Johns Hopkins University, the people of the world must stop having children immediately, although Travis has a child of his own.
What I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to questions.
Yes, but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
millions of Americans and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the Senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you have a covert operation, a cover for that operation will be provided. That's the nature of a covert operation.
Chemtrails. On the internet, they are cited as proof of the government creating clouds to combat global warming.
They claim the American government, with the secret approval of the national government, is covertly using jet aircraft to spray population centres with aluminium, with barium, and with strontium so as to reduce people's immunity and reduce the global population.
That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even talcized paper products.
We've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice. It's exactly what geoengineering patents call for: solar obscuration, to block the sun with toxic metal particulates. And unfortunately, with geoengineers, they don't seem to take the consequences into account. The planet is like a giant physics lab for them, and they seem to not be able to look outside that bubble. This is halos around the sun. We see often as the atmosphere is filled with particulates. It's important to understand, just because you don't see trails from horizon to horizon does not mean you're not breathing particulates. We seldom see blue skies anymore. They're a silvery white color, especially in the mornings or the afternoons. If you look to the east or to the west and you block the sun with something, you can see the air is very silvery white. This is indicative of an atmosphere saturated with particulates. These particulates create drought. This is a very known and not disputed effect of geoengineering. As you saturate the atmosphere with particulates, you diminish rain. People need to get this through their head. This is not about seeding to increase rain. This is about creating artificial clouds, which reduces rain. Global warming and global dimming. Global dimming is something people should be familiar with as well. As of the latest reports, 22% of the sun's direct rays no longer reach the surface of the planet. They're being blocked. The planet is literally encased in a cocoon of toxic metals. Yes, pollution is a part of this problem, but we believe a small part in comparison to the geoengineering influences is horrific, one of which is vitamin D deficiency, of which 98% of the U.S. population is now deficient in vitamin D. The host of diseases and ailments that ensue from that is horrific, not to mention the fact that we are breathing these particulates. So photosynthesis for plants, another issue. You can't block the source of life on planet Earth without consequence.
Clouds were seeded by numerous countries around the globe with various chemicals to produce rain. China was just doing this over the summer in Beijing to make sure that there weren't any there wasn't any rain during the Olympics. But all this has changed dramatically with the U.S. military's secretive research and plans to control the planet's natural weather. This has not been given very much press, and we have to remember that we have a corporate-owned press where 85% of radio, television, and print media is owned by 5 corporations. And as of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around the world. Since about 2000, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy have been spraying the entire United States sky with the toxic brew of chemicals and other biological agents. I just want to show you something.
Jasper Kirby is a particle physicist, currently engaged with cloud physics research at CERN,
the European Organization for Nuclear Research. In an article published in the journal Nature, Kirby reports that cosmic rays, quote, seem to enhance the production of nanometer-sized particles from the gaseous atmosphere by more than a factor of 10, unquote. He added, however, that the particles in question are far too small to serve as cloud condensation nuclei. This important excerpt from Dr. Kirby's 2009 presentation makes it clear that IPCC climate scientists are fully aware that jet aircraft are dumping aerosols into the atmosphere with the effect of deliberate climate warming.
So what do? We must stop allowing them to continue doing this. It is very simply, stand up and fight, if you wish to live. When we are not being bombarded with toxins, we can cleanse our bodies and minds. Websites like getthetea.com and such may be good internet sources to look at, as they are known to have solid products. But we suggest you seek a natural holistic doctor who would know the most about how to fix the body from heavy metal poisonings and the numerous other infections you possess. If you want it to end it. No one is here to save us. We are on our own. We must fight and destroy the elite who knock us and slaughter us and the planet we live on. They are the infection. They are the true parasites and disease of this world. Rise against the machine. We must make it stop. We are on decay. We are awake. Expect us.